What's up, Theophiloi? It is your boy, Benito, and here we are again with another bonus episode to try to make up for the fact that our normal, regularly scheduled episode did not hit last week or whenever it was supposed to hit. We do apologize for that. We do try to stick to our bi-weekly release schedule, but sometimes life gets in the way. I believe that is the quote from Dinosaur Movie. Ah, good. Speaking of life, you can hear the lively sounds of my cats fighting in the background. It would hardly be an Apocrypals bonus episode if you could not hear that. Anyway, life gets in the way sometimes. We are both doing fine. Don't worry. It is not negative things. It is just busy things. So anyway, we probably won't be back until this year's approximate week, which means that probably our Mary Magdalene plus Secret Bonus Friend episode is going to be pushed back. So sorry, because we were trying to get it out for around the time of Mary Magdalene's feast day. That is not going to happen. I apologize. And in fact, there will probably be an episode in between. So sorry to all the Mary Mags stands out there. We will get to it as soon as possible. But anyway, when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do for this bonus episode, I didn't know like what a text I wanted to do or whatever. And then suddenly what happened was I did the thing that I'd been anxiously anticipating for well over a year at this point, which is I saw David Lowery's The Green Knight starring Dev Patel in a motion picture cinema theater, not a cinnamon theater. The movie is it's incredibly good. It does diverge from the original poem to various degrees, which I understand that people who are Arthur nerds are going to sometimes be upset about. But if you're a real Arthur nerd, you understand that Arthuriana is all about changing and adapting to fit the mores of the time. If you're interested in the story of the Green Knight, you can hear me, Benito, and also my friend Craig Kringle from the Weird Christmas podcast talking to everyone's pal, King of the Gnostics, Jonathan Stewart. We talked about the Green Knight, other bits of King Arthur Christmas on the Talk Gnosis podcast from last December. I will include a link to that in the description below. So because this video is inspired by handsome Dev Patel as the mighty Sir Gawain, this video will, by some necessity, contain very minor spoilers for the 2021 film The Green Knight, and also extremely minor spoilers. In fact, what some people might call the premise of the 14th century Middle English poem Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. So I guess be warned if you want to go in completely fresh to this 700-year-old story. That stuff is going to start now. The central conceit of the story of the Green Knight is that a mysterious, large, green knight, literally green, head to toe, arrives at King Arthur's Christmas celebrations and challenges one of his knights, which ultimately turns out to be Gawain, to what he calls a beheading game, which is what it sounds like, taking turns cutting each other's heads off. Gawain takes his turn first, and he severs the giant's head at the neck, at which point the Green Knight stands up, picks up his own dome, reminds Gawain that his turn comes in 1 year, and then he walks away, or rides away on his green horse. This scene makes the Green Knight arguably the most prominent cephalophore in Western literature. The film makes this connection even stronger by including an episode that's not part of the original poem, in which Gawain encounters Saint Winifred, who is an IRL cephalophore, who was not in fact invented for the movie, and whose shrine is actually mentioned in the original poem, even if she herself does not appear and do spooky things like she does in the movie. That ends the spoiler portion. I'm sorry that you learned that the Green Knight does not die in the opening scene, and I'm sorry that you have learned that a person is in the movie. Those are the spoilers. I hope they were mild enough for you. Also, yes, I pronounced it Gawain, which is the traditional, but also it is said Gawain, and if you're King Arthur from the movie, you might say Garwin, because why not? Please don't leave me a comment saying that it's Gawain or Garwin. It's all of them. It's all of them. Leave me alone. All right, anyway, however, off that topic, if you, the viewer of this video, are not a person with the particular type of brain worms that I have, you may be asking yourself, what even is a cephalophore? Is he trying to say cephalopod and messing up? Is the Green Knight an octopus? No. Maybe he might be an octopus. The word cephalophore ultimately comes from this Greek word right here, kephale, which means head, and the ending comes from this adjectival ending, poros, which ultimately comes from this verb, pero, which means to carry. We can see the root kephale, meaning head, in words like encephalogram, pachycephalosaurus, that guy's got a dome on him, and yes, of course, cephalopod. We also see the poros element in words like euphoria, phosphorus, semaphore, and of course the name Christopher. And together, you can probably put it together, it means carrying one's head, head carrier. Yeah, someone carrying a head, and that is what it means. These cats. Stop. Okay. Cephalophores are a motif in art and in hagiography of people, usually but not exclusively saints, as the Green Knight is not a saint, who pick up their own severed heads and then take them out for a little walk. So as you hopefully know if you've listened to our show before, saints are frequently depicted in art holding visual signifiers of their identity because for a long time, people, generally speaking, could not read. And so writing their names under them was not a great way to identify them. But if you have them holding something that identifies them iconographically, that's a great way to identify saints. And so for many martyr saints, that usually means the implement of their own death or some representation of the way in which they died. So in the case of cephalophores, you can probably guess they were beheaded. And it is possible, where does this motif come from? I mean, it could be that you have a martyr who was decapitated, depicted holding their own head merely for the sake of identification, and ultimately someone goes, oh, that must be the story, right, that this person actually picked up their head. There are some things, there's some early church sermons that talk about severed heads being scary to the devil, right? The idea being that martyrdom is a powerful tool. So it could derive from these metaphors as well, or maybe just someone thought it would be a cool spooky story to have someone carrying their own being around. Cephalophores are surprisingly common in the Western Christian Church. In French literature alone, there are well over 100 documented saints walking around with their own heads in their hands. You can see a couple of them here. So although there are millions of cephalophores that wander through this world, I'm only going to take a look at a handful of the ones that I felt were worth closer inspection. Sorry if I leave out your favorite. If you're named after one, or there was a statue of one at your church, I'm sorry. Statistically, it is unlikely that I will talk about your favorite cephalophore unless you happen to like the same ones that I picked just now. So let's actually start with the one who actually appears in the Green Knight movie, the winsome Winifred of Wales. According to a 12th century account of the saint's life, Winifred was the daughter of a Welsh chieftain. She was engaged to be married to a pagan dude named Caradoc. Winifred, however, as you can see by her dress here, intended to become a nun. Caradoc became so upset when he heard this that he cut her head off. You can see here he is. And here is her severed head, and here is her body. And what is this? Notice this stream of water. That is the thing. Where her severed head hits the ground, a spring of water rose up, which is a recurring motif in Cephalo4 stories. Winifred's uncle, himself a saint named Benno, returned her head to her body, at which point she was restored to life. Benno cursed the cocky Caradoc, and the earth opened up and swallowed him. The spring formed by Winifred's bouncing head is called St. Winifred. It was made into a well called St. Winifred's Well. It is a real place. You can go there. The town that surrounds it is called Holywell, spelled Holy Well, right? It's because it's the Holy Well. You can go there. Anyway, its waters are supposed to have miraculously curative powers. It's one of the 7 wonders of Wales. It's known as the Lords of Wales, if you're familiar with Lourdes, the famous holy site in France where people have visions of the Virgin Mary and have their physical ailments healed and such. There's supposed to be a stone on the outside rim of the well where St. Benno sat, and if you yourself sit there and you ask God for something 3 times in the name of St. Winifred, you will get that thing as long as it is deemed beneficent to your soul. All right, next we have St. Denis. St. Denis is arguably the most famous and possibly the earliest Cephalophore. He is the patron saint of Paris, Saint-Denis. He is a big deal in Paris. If you have been there, he's everywhere. Denis, originally known as Dionysius, he was the first bishop in the city that would eventually become Paris. He lived in the 3rd century CE. Denis and his fellow Christian missionaries were so good at converting the Gauls of Paris that the pagan governor arrested them and had them beheaded on the highest hill in Paris, which is now known as Montmartre, the Martyrs' Hill, the mountain of the martyrs. After his head was cut off, Denis is said to have picked up his head, as you can see here, and walked 2 miles with it, preaching the entire way, guided by an angel. He was buried on the spot where he stopped, and today the Basilica of Saint-Denis, it eventually developed around the shrine that was built there, and is now the burial place for French kings. St. Denis is today invoked for protection against all number of head-related ills, including headaches, madness, and demonic possessions. He is counted among the 14 holy helpers, who are the group of saints that were thought to be particularly effective against illness. We've discussed a number of them on the podcast. Their ranks include a number of previous Apocryphals favorites, including Barbara, Blaise, Christopher, and Saint Roch. All right, next we have Judwara, an Anglo-Saxon saint of the 6th century. And according to legend, she was a religious young woman plagued by that classic trope, an evil stepmother. When Judwara began experiencing chest pains due to her ascetic lifestyle and her constant sorrow, weeping for the souls of sinners, her stepmother said, "You know that you can ease your chest pains by," everyone say it together, we all know, how do you stop chest pains? You put soft cheese on your breasts. So her stepmother says, put this soft cheese on your breast, under your shirt. This will ease your chest pains. She agreed. She said, great, that sounds good. At which point the stepmother sends out for her own son and says that Judwara is pregnant out of wedlock. She's going to bring shame on our family. He says, I'll see about that. He rushes in. He feels under her shirt, and her undergarments are damp where the cheese was, damp in the boob area. He becomes convinced that she is indeed pregnant, and so he takes the natural course of action and cuts her head off. As is traditional with these kind of beheadings, a spring sprung up where her head landed. Her disembodied head, I should rather say her disembodied body, then picked up the head and walked with it to church. Seeing this miracle, stepbrother repents, becomes a monk. Great job, bud. I like this story because of the boob cheese. All right, Alban of Mainz. I include him for something approaching personal reasons. Those of you who watched the live stream that Chris and I did with Johnny Sims and Sasha Sienna for their MacGuffin and Company channel, I'll include a link in the description below to that. You would have seen us role-playing as problem nuns trying to save a French village from a hellmouth. It was very fun. My character, as everyone knows, the very famous Hildegard of Bingen, who's a good-natured nun from the Rhineland who just cannot stop crafting fake relics, but with good intentions. So one such relic that she carries around by the pocketful are the alleged kidney stones of St. Alban of Mainz himself from the Rhineland. You can see him here holding a head and also still having a head, but this is a ghost head, I guess. Alban lived during the reign of the Emperor Theodosius in the 5th century CE. We don't really know much about his life, but legends says that he was beheaded by Arian heretics, that is, followers of Arius, not with a Y, Arian with an I. You guys know that by now. And then he picked up his head, and then he walked to his preferred burial site. He is invoked against various pains, including hernia, epilepsy, and, yeah, you know, kidney stones. Saint Aphrodisias was a 1st century saint, a contemporary of your boy Jesus. He was originally supposed to be from Egypt. He was supposed to have been an Egyptian priest who gave shelter to the Holy Family on the flight into Egypt. He was from Heliopolis, they say. He subsequently learns about the life and miracles of Jesus from Alexandrian Jews, and he becomes one of the disciples who received the Holy Spirit at the first Christian Pentecost, where the tongues of flame and all that, right? So, you know, you've got the apostles, but then there's the 72 disciples. He's supposed to be one of them. Following the resurrection and ascension of Jesus, Aphrodisias sailed to southern France, as we will learn is supposed to also have been what happened to Mary Magdalene and Martha and Lazarus. But he sailed to southern France to spread the gospel. He lived as a hermit near the city of Béziers for many years before being named its first bishop. The story goes that he was eventually decapitated by a group of pagans at the site of the local circus, meaning like a Roman-style circus where they did gladiatorial fights and stuff, not like clowns and elephants and stuff. After his head was cut off, the pagans threw it down a well, but the well shot it back out like a giant water cannon. And then at that point, his body picked up the head and began walking through the streets of Béziers. The townspeople tried to home alone him by throwing a bunch of snails into the road where he was walking, but he just walks over them without slipping like banana peels or without breaking one and cutting his foot on snail shell or whatever. The story goes on to say the group of stonemasons made fun of him as he walked by, and they were miraculously turned to stone, and their petrified heads can be seen today on Béziers' Rue des Têtes, the head street of heads. I think these are them. I think these are the ones. Sorry if this is a picture of different stone heads in the Place des Bons Amis. But anyway, Aphrodisias carried his head all the way back to the cave where he had lived as a hermit, and it was there that he was buried, and a basilica named after him was eventually erected there, and here it is. All right, Nicaise. Nicaise of Reims was an early 5th century bishop of the French city of Reims. He was killed by marauding capital V Vandals, whose invasion of France he had allegedly predicted via Jesus-y means. The story goes that he was at the altar in his church when the Vandals burst in and killed him while he was in the middle of reciting Psalm 119, as he was actually saying the verse 25, Adhacit pavimento anima mea, my life is down in the dust. And at the exact moment that he was beheaded, as seen here in this stained glass. But even after his head fell to the ground, it continued to recite, saying the following line of the verse, Vivifica me, Domine secundum verbum tuum, Lord, give me life through your word. So, a miracle. while there's no account of him actually that I've seen, there may be an account of him actually picking up his head and walking. He is included among the cephalophores, but another item that you might notice from looking at this picture that makes him stand out among the other cephalophores is that he is often depicted with most of his head still on his neck and only missing the top of his head, which he often is carrying along with a mitre. You can't actually see like the scalp in this one, but trust me, they're out there. You can Goog those up if you want to, but yeah. Here he is. You can see he's missing the top of his head. All right. Let's look at some almost cephalophores. There are a couple of famously beheaded saints that you might be wondering about vis-a-vis their cephalophoric status. Our good pal, Jesus' #1 cousin, Johnny Bapto, was of course famously beheaded. Salome, Herodias, and so on, and had his dome served up on a silver platter. But because he himself did not carry that platter, he is not typically listed among cephalophores. Our terrible pal, Mr. Paul, was of course also beheaded, as you guys may remember. We've heard a number of miracles associated with that, including that when he was beheaded, milk shot out instead of blood. Obviously, this painter did not get that memo because he painted blood instead of milk. Maybe he just ran out of white paint on all these dudes' robes. Who can say? And also that his head bounced three times, creating the three springs outside of Rome at the area now called San Paolo alle Tre Fontane, St. Paul at the Three Fountains. Our very good boy Jimmy de Voragine says in the Golden Legend that at the moment that Paul's severed head hit the ground, it intoned in clear Hebrew, Jesus Christ, which, to be fair, is probably also what I would say if I could speak at the moment of decapitation. Finally, St. Cuthbert of Lindisfarne is often mistaken for a cephalophore. Why? Because you can see he is carrying a head. However, the important distinction here about St. Cuthbert, and you might notice if you look closely, he is holding someone else's head. He is not holding his own head. Rather, this is the head of St. Oswald, a king of Northumbria, whose head was buried in the same tomb as Cuthbert. So you can see here's the saint with his mitre, like a bishop do, and then here's the king with his crown, like a king do. So, all right, there you have it. A handful of notable head carriers and a few of the different ways that they are depicted in art. You might have, eagle-eyed viewers might have noticed that sometimes they have halos on their severed heads, sometimes halos on their neck stumps, sometimes halos on both their severed heads and their neck stumps, sometimes a severed head in their hand and a ghost head on the neck stump. So truly a smorgasbord of ways to depict holy decapitation. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Go see The Green Knight. Go listen to our podcast Apocrypals if you have not already, if you somehow accidentally stumbled onto this video. Follow all the links in the description and so on. And, we'll see you for approximate week, I hope. In the meantime, peace be with you, etc.